Every kid had gone home, the swings hung still, and the rain soaked everything, except the dog on the bench who hadn't moved in days. No one knew what he was guarding, until the police followed his stare into the woods. The first time anyone really noticed the dog was a Tuesday afternoon, just after school let out. The playground was buzzing with laughter, sneakers thudding against the pavement, the creak of swings slicing through the air. A cool breeze carried the scent of pine from the woods nearby, and the last of autumn's leaves drifted down like confetti. That's when someone spotted him, curled up at the far end of the park on the old wooden bench beside the slide. He wasn't big, but he wasn't small either. Some kind of mutt, people said. Medium build, rough coat the color of dust and ashes, ears that twitched at every sound. His paws were caked with dry mud, his ribs just faintly showing beneath the fur. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just sat there, watching. At first, most assumed he was just a stray. Maybe someone had dumped him nearby, or maybe he'd wandered too far and gotten lost. That kind of thing happened around these parts, especially near the edge of town where the forest got thick and the houses were spread out. A few of the parents called animal control. They said someone would come by in a day or two. But the dog didn't move. He didn't chase the squirrels that darted past the swings. He didn't sniff at the overflowing trash can. Even when a toddler threw a half-eaten sandwich near his feet, he didn't touch it. He just sat. Upright. Still. His amber eyes locked in the same direction every single minute, the edge of the woods behind the monkey bars. Some of the kids started bringing him snacks, crackers, bits of string cheese. One boy even gave him a hot dog from his lunchbox. The dog accepted none of it. Sometimes he sniffed, then turned his head. Other times, he didn't react at all. People joked that he was some kind of ghost dog, guarding the park like it was sacred ground. By the second day, he was still there. Rain came through that night, and in the morning the bench was soaked. But there he was again, water dripping from his coat, eyes still locked on the trees. A man named Joel, who jogged past the park every morning, tried to coax him with a warm sausage roll. He crouched low, held out his hand, and spoke softly. The dog didn't growl, but he did stand, tense and alert, as if to say, "Don't come any closer." Joel backed off, unsettled by the strange mix of calm and warning in the dog's stance. A girl named Sophie posted a picture of him on social media with the caption, "This dog hasn't moved in 3 days. He's just waiting." The photo showed him sitting tall, eyes distant, the woods blurred in the background. It got hundreds of likes overnight. By the end of the week, the town had started whispering. People stopped walking their dogs through the park. Some said he was looking for someone. Others said he was waiting for a kid who never came back. But no one could explain why he wouldn't leave the bench, why his eyes never wandered, or why every person who met his gaze walked away feeling like the dog knew something they didn't. By Thursday, the weather turned cold. The wind blew harder through the swings, sending empty chains clinking like metal whispers. Rain came in bursts, short and sharp, leaving puddles that reflected gray skies and yellow leaves. Still, the dog stayed. He didn't curl up or hide under the bench. He sat straight, his back stiff, head high, eyes still locked on the woods beyond the playground fence. Some said he had to be trained. No ordinary stray would behave like that. Others guessed he was injured or in shock. But there was no limp, no wound, no sign of pain, just patience. Parents pulled their kids away now, not because the dog was dangerous, but because his silence made them uncomfortable. There was something about the way he stared into the trees that made people lower their voices. It didn't feel like watching. It felt like waiting. On Friday, someone left a blanket. A woman with kind eyes and an umbrella placed it on the bench beside him and whispered, "It's going to be cold tonight, buddy." The dog didn't react. He didn't even look at her. He didn't move when the school bell rang, when the little one screamed from the merry-go-round, or when a girl tripped near his paws and burst into tears. He never barked, never growled, never wagged his tail. Not once. He was more statue than stray. By Saturday, people began filming. One man set up a tripod and waited nearly 4 hours to catch the moment he blinked. A teenager with pink headphones took a slow-motion video of the dog as rain dripped from his fur. She added music, soft piano, and posted it online with the caption, "He hasn't left. Not once. What is he watching?" The video spread. Local news picked it up. A short segment aired that evening. The Mysterious Dog of Fairgrove Playground. They showed clips of him sitting in the rain, unmoving, while children played around him. At the diner that night, everyone was talking about it. "I think he's waiting for a kid," someone said. "No," said the waitress, drying her hands on her apron. "He's guarding something." "Or someone," added the cook. By Sunday, people were stopping by the park just to see him. They brought snacks, toys, even tried calling animal rescue again. But every time someone came close, he'd lift his head higher, tense just enough to make them stop. He didn't snap or snarl. It wasn't fear or aggression. It was discipline. He didn't want food. He didn't want help. He just wanted to watch. Even when a cold front rolled in and the wind bent the treetops, he stayed. The bench grew slick with frost. Trash tumbled across the grass. Crows cawed from the wires above. And still, the dog did not move. People didn't know what to make of it. They gave him nicknames: Sentinel, Ghost, Watcher. Some said he was an omen, others, a hero. But everyone agreed on one thing. The dog was waiting for something, and whatever it was, it hadn't come yet. Grace Harrow had been missing for 9 days. Her photo was still taped to every power pole and pinned to every bulletin board in town. A bright, smiling face with wide brown eyes and freckles across her nose. She had been wearing a yellow jacket the day she disappeared, one with little sunflowers stitched on the sleeves. Her backpack was sky blue, with a worn patch in the shape of a cat. That was the last anyone had seen of her, leaving school around 3:15, waving goodbye to her friends, walking the path she always did. But she never made it home. The search had been loud and fast in the beginning. Flashlights combed through every inch of the nearby woods. Drones buzzed over fields and rooftops. Volunteers walked side by side across cornfields and down old gravel roads. Police questioned neighbors, school staff, even passing strangers. For the first few days, it felt like the whole town had stopped breathing. Everyone clinging to the hope that she was just lost somewhere. That maybe she had gotten turned around or wandered off, chasing a butterfly or a rabbit. But hope doesn't last forever, especially when the trail turns cold. On the 5th day, her backpack was found under a bridge, 15 miles from town. The zipper was half open, her books soaked from rain, her lunchbox missing. It didn't make sense. Grace wasn't the kind of girl to wander. She was careful, shy. She called her mom every day the second she got home. She didn't talk to strangers. She followed rules like they were commandments. After the backpack, the town changed. People stopped letting their kids walk home alone. Porch lights stayed on all night. Strangers were watched, even if they were familiar faces. At church, the pastor's voice cracked when he said Grace's name out loud. At school, her desk sat empty, a small bouquet of paper flowers resting on the seat. Her teacher, Mrs. Praz Lang, kept glancing toward the door as if the little girl might still walk in. Grace's parents didn't speak much to reporters. Her father stood by the front porch most nights, staring out at the road like he was waiting for a car that never came. Her mother had started sleeping on the couch, just in case someone knocked late. By the 9th day, the headlines had grown quieter. A few detectives still worked the case, but others were being pulled away. The flyers were curling at the edges. Some people had already stopped mentioning her name out loud. It hurt too much. That's when people started looking at the dog again. Still at the playground, still watching the woods. He hadn't moved. Not for food, not for kindness, not even for a child's hand stretched out in the rain. The local paper ran a short piece. Could this dog be connected to the missing girl? The idea sounded crazy, but then again, so did a 10-year-old vanishing into thin air. And in a town holding its breath, even a silent dog on a bench was something worth hoping for. Ms. Doyle hadn't been to the park in weeks. She couldn't. Every time she passed by, something in her chest tightened, like a hand twisting her heart. Grace used to love this place. On warm days, she'd swing so high, her sneakers nearly touched the branches. On quiet days, she'd sit on the bench with a library book, or just watch the leaves. Always the same bench, the one tucked near the back fence, facing the woods. That's where Miss Doyle saw him. The dog, still and silent, perched like a shadow that refused to fade. It was the same one she'd seen in the news and in students' whispers, kids calling him names like Ghost or Guard Dog. She slowed as she passed, the air around her turning cold despite the afternoon sun. The dog didn't turn to look at her. He didn't flinch or blink. His eyes were glued to the woods beyond the fence, like something inside them mattered more than the people walking past. Miss Doyle stepped closer, carefully. Something about the dog pulled at her memory, like a thread she couldn't quite place. His coat was ragged, his body thin, but his posture was unshakable. She glanced at the bench and felt her breath catch. This was Grace's bench, the one she sat on every single day after school, waiting for her dad to finish work. She would eat crackers, swing her feet, hum songs to herself, and always look toward the trees like she was waiting for a story to begin. Now the dog was sitting in her spot. She knelt slowly, her voice soft. "You knew her, didn't you?" The words left her mouth before she could stop them. The dog didn't answer, of course, but something in the way his ears twitched made her believe he'd heard every word. She pulled out her phone and took a picture, her hands trembling. The police station was quiet when she arrived. She sat down across from an officer she knew, Deputy Finch. He'd been one of the first to search the woods. She handed him the photo and spoke fast, explaining the bench, the dog, Grace's routine. "I know it sounds strange," she said, "but what if he saw something? What if he's still waiting for her?" Finch looked at the photo, then at her. His brow furrowed. "Ms. Doyle, we've had K9 units search those woods. That area's been combed 3 times. The dog's just fixated. Could be trauma, could be nothing. Strays latch on to places sometimes." She shook her head. "But it's the same bench, the same one Grace sat on every day. He's not just fixated. He's focused. He's guarding something." He leaned back with a sigh. "You're not the first to suggest that. But we don't follow dog hunches. Not when there's no evidence." Ms. Doyle left the station frustrated, the wind pulling at her coat as she stepped outside. She looked back toward the park, one more time, past the school, past the swings. The dog was still there, still staring, and somehow, she knew. He wasn't guarding a bench. He was waiting for Grace. The playground was busy again that afternoon, full of restless kids and parents trying to keep up. The sun had finally broken through after days of cold rain, and everything smelled like wet leaves and damp earth. Laughter echoed from the swings, the metal slide burned warm under the sun, and the familiar sound of bouncing rubber came from the far side of the basketball court. No one paid much attention to the dog anymore. He was just part of the scenery now. People tossed him names like Rusty or Buddy or Scout, but he never responded. He never moved from the bench, never blinked, never barked. Some parents even told their kids to leave him alone, afraid he might suddenly turn aggressive, but he hadn't. Not once. Then the ball rolled. It was red and scuffed and half deflated, kicked too hard by a younger boy. It rolled across the grass, past the seesaw, under the fence, and into the brush at the edge of the woods. The boy chased after it, not thinking, feet pounding, laughter trailing behind him like ribbon. He stopped when he reached the trees, confused, peering into the shadows where the ball had disappeared. That's when the dog stood up. It happened so fast that even the parents didn't notice at first. One moment he was on the bench, silent as always, and the next he was leaping off it, body tense, eyes sharp. He let out a single bark, loud, deep, fierce. Everyone turned. The boy froze. The dog barked again, then bolted past him into the trees, tail high, legs moving like he knew exactly where he was going. The playground fell silent. Parents shouted. Someone screamed for the boy to come back. A man vaulted over the fence, scooping the child up in his arms. The boy clung to his neck, too stunned to cry, staring at the trees where the dog had vanished. But someone else had followed. Theo Marks, 16 years old, was sitting nearby with his phone. He had been filming the kids, capturing a few clips for his short film project about everyday life in small towns. The second the dog barked, he hit record, and when the dog tore into the woods, Theo didn't stop to ask permission. He just followed. His feet pounded against wet leaves and twisted roots. Branches snapped back into his face, scratching his cheek, but he didn't care. The dog was fast, but not too fast. He seemed to know Theo was behind him and slowed just enough to keep him close. The barking stopped. Theo slowed too, his breath heavy, phone still recording. The woods were thick here, darker, quieter. He glanced around, heart racing, until he spotted the dog ahead, standing perfectly still at the base of a large tree. He was growling now, low, steady, not a threat but a warning. Theo stepped closer and lifted his phone higher. At the base of the tree, half covered in mud and leaves, was something pale blue. A backpack. Theo gasped. It was small, worn, and patched with a little cat. The dog turned, eyes meeting Theo's, and barked once more, this time not in fear, not in anger, but as if to say, "There, look." He hadn't been sitting still. He had been waiting for someone to follow. Theo's hands were shaking as he held the phone, still recording, though his breath was louder than the sounds in the woods. He stood frozen for a moment, staring at the small blue backpack lying under the tree. It was dirty and damp, one strap twisted beneath it, but the patch was clear, bright pink, shaped like a smiling cat. He didn't need anyone to tell him whose it was. He turned the camera off and called 911. His voice cracked as he tried to explain where he was, stumbling over street names and landmarks. The dispatcher asked if he was sure, if he had proof. Theo said, "It's hers. I know it is. The missing girl, Grace. Her stuff is here. And the dog, he led me here." While he spoke, the dog hadn't moved far. He paced once in a tight circle, then lowered his nose to the ground and began digging. His paws were quick and sure, throwing dirt behind him in sharp bursts. His body shook with effort, but he didn't stop. Mud clung to his legs, his nails scraped against something below the soil. Theo dropped the phone briefly and crouched beside him. "What are you doing, boy?" he whispered. "What's down there?" The dog didn't look up. He kept digging, deeper, faster, growling low under his breath. Theo reached out to touch him, then pulled back. This wasn't play. The dog was on a mission. Whatever he smelled, it mattered. A lot. A minute passed, then another, and then, with a sudden sharp bark, the dog stepped back. Theo leaned forward, his heart pounding. A tattered scarf poked through the dirt, white with red hearts, torn down the middle and stained with brown. Theo swallowed hard. He had seen that scarf before. Grace wore it every day in the cold. Said her mom gave it to her. He reached for it, hands trembling. Next to the scarf was a child's shoe, small, mud-soaked, the sole peeling off near the toe. Theo didn't say anything. He just stared. The air around him felt heavier, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. Birds had gone silent. Even the wind had stilled. Behind him, the dog began to whimper. Not a sad sound, more like frustration. He pawed at the dirt again, nose twitching, ears flicking towards something unseen. Theo picked up his phone and started filming again. He didn't know why. Maybe to prove it was real. Maybe because deep down he understood this wasn't just about finding things. It was about being believed. "The dog found this," he said to the camera, his voice soft. "He brought me here. Nobody else. Just him." Then he added, "And I don't think he's done." The dog circled back to the tree, nose low, tail stiff. He dug again, not far from the first hole. Theo stood back and watched, eyes wide, heart thudding. The sound of sirens began to echo faintly in the distance. The dog paused, looked back at Theo, and barked once, loud, clear, and certain, as if to say, "Hurry." The police arrived fast. The woods lit up with beams of flashlights and voices cutting through the trees. Officers stepped carefully over roots and branches. Following the trail Theo had left flagged with his hoodie tied around a branch. He pointed them to the backpack, the scarf, the shoe. He told them what the dog had done. Some of the officers nodded, others looked unsure. But then the dog barked again and started pawing at the ground with such force and focus that even the most skeptical among them took a step forward. One officer got down on his knees beside the tree, brushing away the loosened dirt. It didn't take long before his hand hit something solid. Not bone, not metal, wood. A flat board, warped by rain, half covered in moss and mud. He pulled it back, and the earth gave a low groan as if releasing a secret. Beneath the board was a hole. A small entrance, dark and narrow, framed by thick roots that twisted together like fingers trying to hold something in. One of the detectives knelt down and shined a flashlight inside. His voice dropped to a whisper. "It's a shelter. Someone made a shelter." The entrance was tight, but a slim officer slid inside. For a moment, the forest held its breath. Then his voice came echoing back from below. "There's stuff in here. Food wrappers, blankets, a broken light, and drawings." The others gathered around, eyes wide as more lights were shined inside the hole. One by one, the items were passed up. A dented lantern, its bulb shattered. A pile of crumpled wrappers from granola bars and crackers, some with teeth marks. A sweatshirt folded into a makeshift pillow. And a set of drawings, torn from notebook paper, bent and smudged with dirt. The crayon lines were faint but clear. Houses, trees, a stick figure with long hair standing beside a dog. Grace. Her name was scribbled in the corner of one page. "She was here," someone said quietly. "She was living in here." The dog paced in a tight circle nearby, growling low, nose in the air. He kept glancing back toward the woods, then toward the shelter, then back again. He didn't want to go inside. He didn't want to sit still. His whole body was tense, like he was waiting for something or someone to arrive. One officer tried to calm him, holding out a hand and speaking gently. The dog didn't bite. He didn't bark. But he didn't stop pacing. His paws left wet prints in the mud as he moved, eyes scanning the trees, tail flicking. "She's not here," another voice said from below. "Not anymore." The officers looked around the clearing. No footprints, no signs of a struggle, just the quiet space where a child had once hidden, surrounded by old candy wrappers and the soft hum of the forest. It was a place built by fear, a place to survive, but it was empty now. The dog walked to the entrance and stood there, staring down. Then he turned and barked again. 3 short barks, urgent, focused. He wasn't saying, "Look." He was saying, "Follow." The next morning, the park was quiet again, but the woods beyond it buzzed with movement. Yellow tape now circled the tree where the shelter had been found. Officers moved carefully through the brush, collecting evidence with gloved hands and hushed voices. Forensics teams arrived before sunrise and began their work in the growing light. One of them gently placed the tattered scarf in a sealed plastic bag. Another held up the crayon drawings and compared them to a school assignment Grace had once handed in. The handwriting matched. The little smiling dog in the corner even looked like the one who had led them there. "She was here," the lead detective said again, more certain this time. "And not that long ago." Mud around the shelter was fresh. Some wrappers still had bits of food inside. The lantern's batteries had leaked, but the bulb hadn't been broken long. They tested for body heat inside the narrow space. It was faint, but still there. Someone had used that shelter within the last 2 days, maybe less. But Grace was gone. The trail around the clearing was messy. Heavy rain had wiped away anything clear. No footprints, no tire tracks. Just damp earth, broken twigs, and the twisting roots of old trees. The dog hadn't left the site. He stayed near the edge, never sitting, never resting. Every time an officer got too close to the tunnel, he barked, not to scare them off, but to push them forward. He was urging them, telling them she hadn't disappeared. She'd moved. They let him off the leash. He didn't run, he didn't bolt, he started walking with purpose. Nose close to the ground, tail straight, ears tuned to every sound. They followed him carefully, 2 detectives behind, and Theo with his phone again. Filming, not for views this time, but because he didn't want anyone to forget what this dog had done. The dog led them downhill, past a rusted fence and the remains of an old trail used decades ago. Vines had taken over most of it. Tree roots cracked the path like veins. At the bottom, the sound of rushing water greeted them. The creek. And something else. A tunnel. The dog stood still in front of it. He looked back once, then stared into the darkness. The tunnel was narrow, built of stone and concrete, old and half covered in moss. A grate had once sealed it shut, but now it hung crooked, one side broken off completely. A cool draft pushed from inside. The dog whined softly and took a step forward. A detective called for backup. Another radioed for a K9 unit to assist, but when they looked down at the dog in front of them, muddy, tired, eyes focused, they realized they already had the only tracker they needed. He sniffed the tunnel entrance and gave a quiet bark. Not loud this time, not urgent, but steady, assured. She was still out there, and he was going to find her. The tunnel was cold, damp, and darker than anyone expected. Flashlights barely reached more than a few feet ahead, their beams bouncing off wet stone and tangled roots. The walls narrowed in places, and the air smelled like earth, metal, and something older, something still. The water from the creek trickled nearby, echoing faintly like footsteps in the distance. The dog stepped forward first, his paws silent on the cracked concrete. He didn't hesitate. His head was low, ears forward, body tense but sure. He had been here before. Or maybe he had followed her scent from the start. No one said a word. Not the officers following behind him, not Theo with his camera held against his chest, not even the detective leading the way. There was only breathing, footsteps, and the steady sound of the dog's paws moving deeper into the dark. The tunnel twisted to the left, then dipped. The further they went, the colder it became. Bits of broken wood and rusted pipes lined the sides. Graffiti faded by time and moisture marked the stones, names and dates from years long gone. The dog paused once, sniffed the air, and let out a low whine. Then he moved again, faster now, tail twitching, paws splashing through a shallow puddle. They rounded a final bend, and the light hit something. Not big, not moving, just a small shape hunched against the wall. "Hold up," one officer whispered. The beam focused. A girl, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around them, hair matted and tangled. Her yellow jacket was stained and torn, her shoes mismatched, one gone completely, the other too big. Grace. Her eyes flinched at the light. She didn't cry out, she didn't move. She just stared, wide-eyed, her face pale and hollow from days without rest. Then the dog barked, once, sharp, not loud, but enough. Grace's head turned, and when she saw him, everything inside her broke open. She didn't scream, she didn't shout. She simply crawled forward with what little strength she had left and wrapped her arms around his neck, her face pressed into his fur, her body trembling. Tears soaked his coat, but he didn't move. He stood still as a rock, letting her cling to him like an anchor in a storm. "He found me," she whispered, her voice barely a sound. "He didn't leave." The officers didn't move right away. One wiped his eyes. Another called for medics. But no one spoke above a whisper. It felt like they had stepped into something sacred. The girl didn't want to let go. She held onto the dog like he was the only thing keeping her in the world. Her fingers tangled in his dirty fur, her forehead resting on his shoulder. "He came every day," she murmured. "He sat at the bench. I saw him. I knew he would come." The dog closed his eyes, just for a moment, as if finally allowing himself a breath. He had done it. He had brought her home. Grace lay curled up in a hospital bed, wrapped in warm blankets with monitors gently beeping beside her. Her face was still pale, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion, but she was safe. Nurses moved quietly in and out of the room, checking vitals and whispering to one another. Her parents hadn't left her side since the ambulance brought her in. Her mother held her hand. Her father sat at the foot of the bed, not even pretending to hide the tears that slid down his cheeks. The dog lay near the door, curled but alert. Dirty and thin, his eyes never strayed far from Grace. When a nurse got too close too fast, he lifted his head. When the lights buzzed too loud, his ears twitched. But he didn't bark. He didn't whine. He simply stayed. A detective came in mid-morning, notebook in hand. He didn't push too hard. He knelt beside Grace and spoke in a soft voice. "Only if you feel okay, sweetheart. Can you tell us what happened?" Grace nodded, slowly. Her voice was raspy, but steady. She began with the man. He was outside the school, leaning against a van. He said her mom had been hurt, that she was at the hospital, and Grace had to come quick. At first, she didn't believe him. But he said her full name. He knew her street. She panicked. She ran. Through backyards, between trees, into the woods. She had been walking that trail before, so she knew it led somewhere hidden. She found the shelter by accident. A dip in the ground. A space under twisted roots. It was small and dark, but it felt safe. She stayed there, afraid to go back. Afraid he would still be waiting. "I thought I'd have to wait forever," she said. "I didn't think anyone would come." She looked at the dog and smiled. It was the first smile anyone had seen from her in days. But he came. Every day. He sat on the bench. I saw him through the trees. Everyone in the room turned to the dog. He didn't move, just blinked once, slowly. "He followed me once," Grace continued. "I was looking for food. I dropped my granola bar. He didn't eat it. He brought it back. Then he stayed with me that night, just outside the shelter. He didn't come in, but I could hear him breathing. That's how I knew I wasn't alone." Her mother cried softly. Her father stood up and walked across the room to the dog. He knelt and, for the first time, reached out to touch his head. The dog let him. "He brought me wrappers, crackers, a slice of cheese once. I don't know where he got them, but I think he was stealing them for me." The detective smiled gently. "Do you know his name?" Grace nodded again. "His name is Lucky." The room was quiet. Her voice was soft. "Because I was." The day after Grace was found, a woman from animal control came to the hospital. She brought a scanner, a clipboard, and a box of dog biscuits in her jacket pocket. She moved carefully, not wanting to startle the dog lying by the hospital bed, but Lucky didn't growl or flinch. He simply watched her with tired eyes, as if he'd been through all the noise before and had nothing left to be afraid of. She knelt beside him and gently scanned the back of his neck. A soft beep followed, and a number flashed on her screen. "I knew it," she whispered. "He's chipped." She looked up at Grace's parents. "This dog has a history. He's not just a stray. His name used to be Baxter. He was once a certified therapy dog." Grace turned her head slowly from the bed, listening. The woman continued. "He belonged to a veteran who had PTSD. They lived in the city for a while, but something happened. A neighbor reported hearing yelling all the time. The man was struggling, and the dog wasn't safe anymore. He was rescued by a shelter, retrained and adopted again. But then he got abandoned a second time, left behind when the family moved. He bounced between shelters after that. No one wanted a dog with scars and a cloudy eye." She looked at Lucky, and her voice softened. "But someone trained him to help. That doesn't go away." Grace blinked slowly, her fingers brushing the blanket. "He used to come to school," she said. "He was in the reading room." The detective, still taking notes in the corner, paused and looked up. "The school has a dog program?" Grace nodded. "Once a month. Dogs come to sit with kids while they read. They make us feel less nervous. I always picked him." "Are you sure it was him?" She gave a small smile. "I remembered his eye. One's a little cloudy. And the way he sat. So still, like he was listening to every word." Her mother covered her mouth. Her father stared at the dog like seeing him for the first time. Lucky didn't seem to notice. He rested his chin on his paws, blinking slowly, as if he finally had permission to rest. The woman from animal control put away her scanner. "It's rare," she said. But sometimes, when a dog is bonded with someone, even just for a short time, they remember. It's not about years, it's about moments. And trust, Grace whispered. I trusted him right away. That night, Lucky was given a new collar. Clean, soft, blue like the sky. It had a simple silver tag. One side read, Lucky. The other, Property of Grace Harrow. As the hospital settled into quiet and the lights dimmed in the hall, the girl and the dog finally slept, side by side, together. She had been lost. He had been forgotten. But somehow they had found each other again. The seasons turned quietly after Grace came home. Winter melted into spring, and the town slowly returned to normal, though normal never felt quite the same again. Parents still watched their children more closely. Teachers hugged their students a little tighter. And every now and then, someone passing through the park would glance toward the woods and remember the dog who wouldn't leave the bench. The town had decided to honor him, not with medals or parades, but with something that would last, something that would keep his quiet watch alive. By summer, construction began at the edge of the playground. Kids pressed their faces to the fence, asking questions. Grown-ups gave small smiles and answered softly. It's for him. No one needed to say his name. Everyone knew. When the statue was unveiled, it was simple. A life-sized bronze sculpture of a dog sitting upright on a wooden bench, his head turned slightly, eyes fixed on the trees at the edge of the park. The artist had captured every detail, the curve of his ears, the strength in his chest, even the hint of weariness in his gaze. At his paws, resting against the bench, was a small plaque. It read, To Lucky, the dog who never gave up. Grace was there that day, standing beside her parents, her hand resting gently on the real Lucky's back. He had changed too. His coat was shinier now, his body a little heavier, his steps slower, but his eyes were still steady, still watching, not because he had to, but because that's who he was. After the crowd faded, Grace stayed behind. She sat on the bench beside the statue, one hand wrapped around Lucky's leash. For a while, she said nothing. She just listened to the wind in the trees and the sound of children laughing nearby. Then she turned to him. You don't have to watch anymore, she whispered. I'm safe now. Lucky looked up at her, his tail thumping once. For the first time since the day he claimed that bench, he didn't sit. He lay down beside her, resting his chin on her shoe, eyes half closed, breathing slow and even, not watching, not waiting, just being there. He had done his part. Grace came back every day after that. Sometimes she brought books. Sometimes she just walked with Lucky through the park. Kids would come up to pet him, and parents would nod in respect as they passed the statue. Some of them left small gifts near the base, dog treats, hand-drawn cards, flowers. One day, Grace brought a folded note. She tucked it behind the plaque, where only she knew it was there. It said, Thank you for staying. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for finding me. And beneath that, in smaller handwriting, Love, Grace. Lucky slept peacefully that afternoon in the shade of the bench. He didn't have to guard anymore. The girl he waited for had come home. Thank you for watching this unforgettable journey of a dog's devotion. If this story left a mark on you, show your support with a like, and join us by subscribing for more inspiring stories like this one.